Hey guys. Okay, I need to put on my audio. I found out that recording audio from here is much better from there. It sounded like that, or even better. Like here. It's good. I just have to sit like this the entire time. Yeah, I think it's good. Okay. So then I clap, because then the wave of the sound will let me know how to synchronize the video and the sound. This is the new talk space. I'm filming this in my new space that I'm really excited about, because I feel like I have more space to create, even though I'm really loving this wall. When I moved in, I was like, oh, it's a bit annoying that there is like these two different walls. Like there's this and then there's the normal white. But the more I live in here, I'm like, oh my goodness, most of my life I've lived in white walls, and it's actually quite nice to be in some colorful wall. And also the colors are nice because they're earthy, calm colors, so I can't complain. I bet it's really old, but it's still really cute. I feel like it works. So I'm working with it. Anyway, so I've made a little setup for us to have this conversation. I want us to have more conversations that inform growth and inform a journey of healing and a journey of just, we are always evolving, we are always learning. We're never in our final form because we are always evolving. We're organic things, so there is no final form. It's the journey is the final form. But today I'm talking about how I used to hate being black, and I made a video about this a few years ago on Abantume, but I never really talked about it here, and I feel like years have gone by since that girl, because your girl is grown now, that even though I had grown up thinking I like being black, when I see my actions I'm like, no sis, you didn't really. And it's interesting seeing back, comparing it to where I am now and realizing the differences and how much I have grown as a person. Okay, so I like to start off like a bit with a background story of my black existence. I don't know if you guys know from the channel, but I think I've mentioned a few times, and those of you who have been following for a long time, you already know that I was born in Uganda, and then I grew up partially in South Africa, and then most of my growing up was in Denmark. And then after that, I've traveled a lot of different places. I've lived in different spaces, currently in Lisbon, Portugal. So existing in this black skin has been through a lot of phases and a lot of locations that have made me into the person I am today. I think the first time I realized my blackness existed was when we moved to South Africa. And it was not only my blackness, but the kind of black I was. Because weirdly enough, it wasn't so much that, because apartheid had, of course, ended a few years before we were in South Africa, but there was still the lingering effects of that kind of trauma. And you never get rid of that kind of trauma just like that. And I also believe we don't get rid of trauma just by making new policies if there is no effort to heal and restore the people who have experienced the trauma, the people who have benefited from the trauma. And that goes for all countries, especially as a decolonial person, somebody who's quite persistent in my own decolonizing journey. And for me, that's always questioning the framework that I exist in, because I know that most of my reality is tainted and tainted with Eurocentric perspective and Eurocentric points of view. And the language I speak is not the language of my people. So I know that I have to be aware if I want to live a decolonized existence, even though there's only so much, because I am what I am because of that reality at the same time. But the things I can change, the things I can question, best believe I'm going to do that. Anyway, so that was a bit of my history of the the being I am and the places they've been. And growing up in South Africa, my first experience with my blackness was actually more about the darkness of my skin rather than actually being black. There is a lot of colorism in a lot of countries that have experienced the traumatic effects of colonization and Eurocentric beauty standards, and South Africa is not exempt. I would say that in Uganda we were a bit lucky because the population never really mixed. I don't know, I always say I have to study more about how that was possible. So when the British left Uganda, most people existed in blackness, so to say, whereas in South Africa it's a bit more complex. I think in Africa it's the one closest to, let's say, an experience you'd have in America, in England, in the diaspora, Western diaspora, because you have the structure of whiteness and there's still a big population of white people who are still in charge of it. So there is that perpetuation of the hierarchy of beauty and the hierarchy of value and so forth. And I feel like that's when I really first experienced it and noticed it. I remember being called names because of the darkness of my skin, which made me realize, oh, okay, so, because before that I didn't know about race, about none of that. I was around 6 years old, 6, 7. And a lot of my friends who were South Africans, a lot of them were also lighter skinned people. And it became more evident for me to realize that there was not only that this was different, because I noticed the difference, but that was better. That my kind of darkness was bad and was ugly just because of the shade of my skin. And I remember internalizing that as a child and thinking, I need to fix this. Isn't that wild that as a young kid, something I was born with, something I couldn't do much about, I was thinking, how do I fix the wrongness of the skin I'm born in? You know, maybe not in such a well-formulated mindset thought, but like that was the action, that was the mission I was having for myself. I remember jumping forward, one story that sticks with me to this day was when I used to wash clothes with my mom, or sometimes I wash my clothes. My little sister, my baby sister, was 8 years younger than me, so now I'm going a bit forward. This is like 9, 10 years old. And she was born when I was 8, and we used to wash her nappies, and my mom would always add bleach into the bucket and let it soak, and then it would remove the stains. With my child mind, I thought, okay, that removes the darkness in the white nappies and it makes them pristine and beautiful and white. That's exactly what I'm gonna do. So one day I was taking a bath and I was like, this is the day, I think my mom was not home, and I took I took an amount of bleach and I put it in the bathtub and I sat in it. You know, I always tell that story and I never get really emotional about it, but now like really saying it like in this context and out loud, I feel so sad for that girl. Like I said in like thank goodness in the universe that nothing really crazy happened to me, but like I sat in that and I scrubbed my skin, and I hoped that at some point I would get lighter because the dirt, the darkness would wash away like it did my baby sister's dirty nappies. And obviously it didn't. We're still here, we're still black, thank God. But I remember getting out and feeling like empowered that I was doing something about it, empowered that I was trying to get lighter at the very least. So that was my experience in South Africa. Like I really became aware of the darkness of my skin and how ugly that was and how unbeautiful that is. I wrote about this a bit in my book, In Constant Bloom, but I talked more about the first time I as a girl, became aware of beauty and ugliness, and how it felt like there were the few that would be beautiful, and then there were the rest of us who would look on and hope and try and buy and work our way to being beautiful. And it was such an alienating experience because when you're a kid, you grow up and you're just having a blast being here, regardless of your circumstances. The little moments you get to play, to move around, like those are golden, and you're happy as can be. You don't really stop to overthink about your worth or your value in these systems. It's only through those little stories that you start building your story, you start putting yourself in the context you exist in. Like, okay, this is where I belong, this is how I am, this is how I compare. Suddenly, all these new stories you're telling yourself, they make you smaller and smaller and smaller, or they make you want to be smaller and smaller and smaller, or work to be like the people you think deserve to take up space, deserve to be seen, and so forth. So that was South Africa. And then when I was 12, we moved to Denmark. And in Denmark, I was bathed in a sea of physical bleach. No, I was just surrounded by whiteness everywhere. My school, my home, everywhere. Except for my family, my little family, everybody around us was white. And this manifested in myself in different ways. And this is also why it's so important to talk about what happens to us when we lack representation. I'm so happy that I bet if you're a young person watching my video, you don't even realize what it means to wake up and go to sleep constantly just not seeing anything like you. Unless they were talking about poverty, unless they were doing fundraising for Africa, then you would see yourself reflected in the media in a vision of pity, in a vision of sadness, in a vision of despair, not in a way that was uplifting or inspiring or empowering. That's why I go big on the stuff I create with that effort, because I know what it was like to grow up without it. And I'm so happy that young girls growing up now, because of social media and having a way to bypass conventional media, we see more of ourselves. You can see me on your phone, in your room, I don't know where you're watching this from. Whereas growing up, like if the TV didn't show it, if the radio didn't play it, you wouldn't see it. If somebody didn't publish a book and say that book is worthy through white controlled media publishing platforms, you wouldn't read that book. But now I wrote my own book, I have my own podcast, I can make YouTube videos, I can write a blog, I can be there, I can exist in the common space, I can share my own little universe, and so can you. And it's such a different experience than when we were growing up. And because of growing up in that reality of not seeing yourself, you become, like I said before, an alien onto yourself. You become a black body inhabited by a white mind or a white reality, which is such a dissociating experience. Like, you only realize it when you get a bit to the other side. I remember like the things I thought were beautiful, the music I listened to, the body type I wanted to look like, the clothes I bought and how I wanted them to fit, and how frustrating I got when they didn't fit because my body is not created with the way they design clothes in Denmark, for example. Like, I've always had more of a small upper body and then a rounder lower body, and this was before butts were in or big underbodies were in. So there was a lot of shame in even how my body looked. And feeling like, why can't I look like my friends who are more athletic looking, and they were more slender and tall and less boobies, less butts, less thighs. I just wanted to be less than, because I felt like I was too much, and in all the worst ways. My skin was too dark, my body was too shapely, especially going through puberty when you put on that extra baby fat that needs to support your growth. Well, I didn't get a lot of growth, but it supported other things growing, I guess. I felt very insecure in the representation of myself physically. Even like with my hair, realizing like, I remember the first time we got our hair relaxed, and I really hope that's not too loud. It is so loud. I don't know when they're gonna stop doing that. The day I film is the day you guys need to do that. Okay. So I remember the first time we got our hair relaxed, and me and my sisters, we slept without combs so that we could wake up and comb my hair and flip it to the side and flip it to the, just like with my hair. And when it was relaxed, I always felt like it's nice. Or when I had braids or things that made it seem a bit longer and it could do the movement of what hair, I could do a messy bun, I didn't always think that, okay, I'm gonna do my hair like that so I can look like that. It wasn't such a conscious decision. It was more of what was represented to me, what the options were for me, and I naturally lived up to those options. I lived according to what those options had given me. And I remember also that's the time I had my eating disorder, and that was also in a way an effort to make my body a certain way. That also is connected to another trauma, because to be honest, racism is a trauma by itself, and living in a reality that is detached from you is also a bit of a trauma in itself. But I remember, like, even with my eating disorder, that looking at my thighs and hoping they get smaller and my butt gets smaller so that I can look like, at some point I was into emo stuff. Like just the emo girls I saw or the hippies I saw, like that was the vibe. And feeling so frustrated, I used to look at myself in the mirror and like just squeeze parts of my body I didn't like. And I feel so sad for my body that I used to do that, because today, sitting here, this woman, I love my body, I love being in it, but just the memory of looking at it in the mirror with disgust and with just wishing it wasn't looking like that. It didn't do that, it didn't be too much of that. And then going forward, I remember also, even with my relationships, obviously I feel like that's also more of a ratio, but it goes back to representation. You were surrounded with only white people, and I remember all my crushes were like Leonardo DiCaprio, Ryan Gosling, Orlando Bloom, like all these very clearly white guys. And the thought of imagining myself with somebody that looked like me felt a bit alien. It wasn't impossible, because I remember I got a big crush on Chris Brown, and for me that was the beginning of the other direction. When I was younger in South Africa, I did have crushes on boys that looked like me, because obviously I lived in that reality where the majority looked like me. So there was that even in my dating life. And I would like to talk about now a bit of my awareness of it and what I did to try and find my own anti-blackness and my own self-hate, even though I didn't realize that that's what it was. I remember when I started getting interested in decolonization, when I started researching anti-blackness, when I realized there was this world of information about Black people, for Black people, not just looking at us as objects or as stories to be told by white voices and white narratives, but Black people narrating Black stories with the intention of healing, with the intention of empowering and informing and knowledge. That was so big for me, and that's so crazy, because you grow up in a country and you have one of the best educations in the world, or education systems in the world, but still in that education system, it's the best education system if you happen to be white. If you're not, you'll get a great education, but you'll be really misinformed about your own reality and existence. And that for me is a crime in itself against the being. That, not that they focus the education on themselves, because like I always say, your country, your rules, go for it, but just the realization that nobody would know or even would voice the fact that this education is going to be empowering to your white friend, and maybe it's going to be disempowering to you, and then it's going to sustain the reality we live in that perpetuates that disempowerment and that empowerment for the other person. So for me, realizing that, and realizing that I had to be actively engaged in my own unlearning, in my own decolonization, in my own attainment of knowledge that would be healing and serving of me as a person, it was a big discovery, but one that ignited my interest in knowledge. Because before I would go to school just to learn stuff so I can I didn't feel like I was that engaged with what I was learning. I'd learn things, but it was more like a duty. School felt more like a duty. You went there, you studied. It stopped, so let's try again. What was I saying? So just to exist in that realm of just whiteness, and how that also informed the way you felt like you needed to exist. And yeah, so you have all that knowledge and it's disempowering. But when I started learning from an Afrocentric perspective, like, learning was so much fun. And I imagine maybe this is what my friends have always been thinking, like feeling that, because they were learning about people who look like them, who did things that are relevant to their story, who put them in an empowering light, whereas we got just the same as they got, which wasn't necessarily sensitive to our differences, to our reality, to the fact that we did not look like that, and most of their accomplishments and triumphs were at the cost of people who looked like me. So it just started feeling like, now that knowledge was personalized, it was more interesting and it was more inspiring, and it made me so excited to learn. And that's the beginning of healing of my anti-blackness, because it all started in the mind. When I changed what I watched, when I changed what I read, when I put in there, it was like a nutrient that I was missing, and so it was causing me to act a certain way. But as soon as I got positive Black images, and for me, Tumblr, it was during the time of Tumblr, it was very important. Tumblr, Instagram, like, these were, now when you go there, it's normal for you to just be in a sea of Blackness. But when I was growing up, that was a big thing, to open your computer. And I stopped watching mainstream media or just television. I would always go on the internet because I could look for what I wanted to see, and I could engage with people who looked like me, people who cared about the things I cared about. And slowly and slowly, it changed the way I saw my skin color, it changed the way I saw my hair, it changed the way I saw my body. But another thing that was important for my body was my trip to Africa in 2015. Before that, I already started healing that aspect of my life, but traveling to Uganda, seeing people that looked like me, who had the same makeup of being as me, and seeing how they carried their bodies. I saw people who were like me, who were a bit short, they had small upper bodies, big bottoms, or rounder bottoms, and carrying themselves with such pride. Even the way I walk today is inspired by that trip. Inspired in the sense, like, I realized my people, they walk with such a pride. They walk with their head towards the sun, with their butts towards the sun. There is a sort of dignity in the way they take space, they exist. And when I came back home to Denmark at that point, having experienced that, I saw my body so different. Like, I loved the way my body formed, how different it was, because it was unique and it told a story of where I came from. My dark skin told a story of where I came from. My kinky hair told a story of where I came from. That was not something to be ashamed of, like an ugly past that I needed to discard and just at every effort try to escape and distance myself from it. But it was something beautiful, something of resilience, something of power, something of hope that I could carry through life, that the people like me from the beginning of time, the beginning of mankind, have existed and endured, and they live today. And I have a piece of all those people embodied in me. How can I not love my existence? How can I not celebrate my existence in this body, in this being, when it's something that has been passed down to me through generations? And so, finally, I think I am somewhere in my life where I am intentionally Black, in the sense that it's no longer something that was unseen, in a way that if you have nothing in your head, or if you stand for nothing, or if you are grounded in nothing, you will be grounded in somebody else's idea or somebody else's reality. By grounding myself in the knowledge I have of my ancestors, the knowledge I have of my heritage, of people like me, not even just in Uganda, but around the world. That's why even when I travel, I love to experience Blackness other places, whether it was in Brazil or even in the European diaspora. And also I look forward to traveling more in Africa, like that's the next goal. I'm just so happy to know that there is so many ways that we can exist from a place of pride and joy. And that's also what I try to share here. So I hope my story inspires you. I don't know what your story has been growing up like. How has your relationship changed with your skin color, with your hair color, with your body since growing up? I imagine a lot of my followers, I noticed that it's a nice range. There are some young people, but there's also people a bit older, which I like because that's where I am, so it's good. So I love to hear how that has influenced you. I feel like just personally, I'm enjoying, and I can't wait to create more things and to create a world and to create platforms where future generations will see themselves and be inspired to be themselves and inspired to add to that beauty and add to that universe. Just one person at a time, one healing at a time, one reflection at a time, one empowerment at a time. Anyway, so that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a lovely week. And I send you lots of love and hugs with love, light, and courage to be who you are and to stand firmly for something that is true to you, so you do not drift away in the madness of the world. Ciao. That was a lot, right?
Stay up all night, just lay up. Use half of this spaced up to make moves with, or all of it, of course. And it ain't no room in Paris. We can still fly high, then crashing. Just make sure you pass it. No, you can't imagine. Ooh, it's automatic.